Oh my gosh, it's live. Hi, guys. I'm just getting ready. Sorry for being a little bit late. Hi, Jerusha. You guys, I have a really exciting one today. What breed of cat are you? I don't think I am a cat. I'm a delicious divine human. All right. Today, we are going to be talking about death. And as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, every time that I choose a theme for my podcast, it's something that's relevant in my life. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate that. It helps get my message out there if you guys are interested in it. It is very activating for you because it's activating me, and I am a being here working not just in my own personal life, but on a collective consciousness. There's a collective activation that happens as I'm going through and discovering these things for you. A big part of my year has been clearing intergenerational trauma within myself and my family. And it is wild. It is crazy. I've had lots of cries over it, some of pain, but a lot of it of just relief. So today we are going to be talking about death and becoming death in your own life. And I have two stories, so two mythic stories that we're going to be covering. One is Persephone. She is one of the goddesses of, a mythic archetype. As many of you may know, she was stolen and taken into the underworld. And so we'll go into that story. And the next one is Inanna, which is a Sumerian myth story where she willingly went into the underworld. So first we're going to talk about Inanna. Yeah, we got my crew. We got Jessica's here, Abigail. Welcome. Reed, welcome. If you guys want to pop some stuff in the chat, please go ahead and do so. But first we're just going to do a little bit of a story tell, okay? So the first story we're going to talk about is a Mesopotamian myth of the goddess Inanna. And so this time period is around 2500 to 1000 BC. And here's the story. So you've got Inanna, and before she descends into the underworld, she tells her servant Ninsabar, or Ninshubur, however you want to say that, to lament for her at the ruins and mourn her both public and in private if she does not return from the underworld. Ninsabar is instructed to go and weep before Enlil, which is the god of air, and then Nana, which is the moon god, and lastly Enki, which is the god of wisdom. We're going to be talking about all kinds of death, but we're going to be talking about just death in general here. So we'll see where it goes. I'm a little flow state, Richard, and so I just kind of like let the discussion flow. So she tells her servants to go to these gods and have and then mourn for them. So she has her servant go weep before the god of air, then the moon god, and then the god of wisdom. So Enlil, Nana, and Enki. And then the hope is that if she goes into the underworld, that that weeping and that pleading is going to help bring her from the underworld. Now, in both of the mythos, is once you go into the underworld, you can never return. So once you go into once you are dead, you can never return from that death. And so she does this as almost this anchoring approach of, if I go into the underworld, if I die, I want something that's anchoring me at, this location, anchoring me to be able to bring me back from the chaos. Now, if you've ever watched any of my other podcasts or episodes, I can't remember the number of the episode, but it was called Shadow Worth. And I talk about this where, like, emotionally, if you start going deep into a lot of us just don't even deal with emotions because they're crazy. It's a lot. It's hard to work through some of them. It's hard to piece it together. It's hard to, come out of it. Sometimes you can go into an emotion and never return out of it. So, I think of people that they get divorced. Some men will get divorced, and then instead of figuring out, okay, what happened, what can I do differently, why did that happen to me? They're just simply bitter, and they just live in that bitterness for an extended period of time. And or women might become angry at their ex who, whatever the situation is, but they become angry, and then every man, she just like focuses that anger on him and not looking at herself of, what did I do to what kind of energy did I bring forward to have this, instead of having that constructive, why did the emotion come up? We have a tendency to like live in that emotion. So it could be anger, it could be bitterness, it could be disgust, name the emotion. There's a chance like you're living in a low, and I think the low vibration emotions are what we're talking about here. So there's different frequencies for different emotions. So in this in this journey of her willingly going into the underworld, her first thing is to tell her servant, hey, look, you're my anchor here. If I don't return, please, send somebody for me. So she has this hope that they will bring her back. In my episode called Shadow Worth, I wish I could remember the number. I think it's like 9. I don't know. I talk about, if you're going deep into your emotions, I liken it to like swimming in if you're swimming and you know how some water is high visibility and then some water is very low visibility, it's a little murky. When you're unfamiliar with emotions and going deep within your emotions, sometimes having that murkiness, you might not know which way is up. And I think I talked about like in Harry Potter when they go down and then like they get like caught up in with the mermaids or with the seaweed. I haven't watched or read a lot of Harry Potter, but I just visually can remember that scene where, there's things like holding onto your leg and like it won't let you go up, and then all of a sudden you're disoriented and you don't know which way is up, and how to get back to that even keel, that present mindful part of who you are. So just being present in yourself, you're kind of like stuck in maybe the past, or maybe you're worried about the future. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but having an anchor to bring you back. So having somebody, I say like, having a coach or having a mentor or somebody that's going to be able to gather all the insights from your life and say, hey, you told me that your goal was this, but now you're like out here. Let's come back to your goal instead of like, floating away or maybe sinking to wherever you're at. So that's the first thing that she does, is she anchors herself, okay? And it doesn't mean that it's not easy, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be the best way to get out. But I think having that anchor, from what I'm reading in this myth, is like the most important thing. Okay, so then Inanna willingly journeys to the outer gate of the underworld. Now, her journey, this story, there's gates, there's different gates in order to get to the underworld. And at the gate, she sternly calls out to the gatekeeper, Nettie, to open the doors. Okay, and there are 7 gates that Inanna must pass through. And when she gets to the first gate, her shigura, or the crown of the steep, is taken from her. So first gate, her crown is removed. And she has all of these jewels and gems and things that give her power, but the first thing, she has to give up her crown. And then at each gate, she must give another personal possession, her powerful personal possessions. So here it says her necklace of lapis beads was taken from one of the gates, and then a double strand of beads from her breast. Her breastplate is taken, her gold bracelet, her lapis measuring tools, and then finally her royal robe. All of these are stripped from her as she descends even deeper and deeper into the underworld. So now she's naked and she appears in the throne room of Ereshkigal, her older sister and the goddess of the underworld. So now she is presenting herself to the goddess of the underworld, and she is completely stripped of everything. And she is getting ready to go enter into the throne room. And then the judges of the underworld, the Inanna, come up to Inanna and pass judgment on her. Okay, so now she's stripped of everything, and now she's appearing in front of the judges in the throne room, and they pass judgment on her, and their deadly gaze and their shouts of anger and guilt strike her dead. So she dies, and her body is hung from a hook like rotted meat, or rotting meat. And she is in this way for 3 days and 3 nights. And after her whole journey down there, and now 3 days and 3 nights go by, she has not returned from the underworld. So her servant laments at the ruins and beats on the drums in the temples and cuts herself, dresses in sackcloth, visits the gods, and lets them know Inanna hasn't returned from the underworld. We need to go retrieve her. And Inanna, in this story, Inanna chooses to go into the underworld. It doesn't say like why she went, what her purpose was for that, but the understanding is that when you go into the underworld, you cannot return. Jerusha. So she did not return, and I don't know if this was a way of her getting some sort of power, but we can kind of figure that out later. So Enlil and Nana both refuse to help her. So Enki does agree. Enki was the god of wisdom, does agree to release Inanna from the underworld. So concerned for the goddess, he creates servants out of dust and commands them to sneak into the underworld, where they commiserate with the labor-panged Esrigala and persuade her. So her sister, the goddess of the underworld, Enki sends these servants that he created out of dust to go in there and sneak and persuade her to release Inanna. So as Inanna is ascending back to the great above, the Inanna, so the Inanna were the ones that were passing judgment on her in the underworld. So the Inanna sees her and tells her she can't leave without somebody taking her place. And the Gala, the demons of the underworld, also sees her. So now she's alive after her 3 days and 3 nights of being hung like rotting meat from this down there in the throne room. And so Enki is imploring her to come back, and now the Gala are like, no, you're not going back. You belong here. And then Inanna are like, you can't return without somebody taking your place. So the Gala tell Inanna they will not travel, that they will travel with her to the great above and try to take Ninsubar in her place. Ninsubar is her servant. Inanna pleads with them to not take her servant, so the Gala state that they will take her sons, which are Shara and Lulal, and Inanna begs them not to take her sons. So the Gala sees her. She travels to the Big Apple City Big Apple Tree in the city of Uruk, which is known as Erech or Unug. there, Inanna's husband, Dumazid, is sitting on his throne, lavishly dressed. So this is her husband. And he's lavishly dressed. And what does that mean? Like, he doesn't know that she's gone, doesn't care that she's gone, could be, just isn't mourning her. And so so Inanna tells the Gala to take her husband, Dumazid, and because she's very displeased with him that he's not mourning that she was gone. And so she allows the demons to take him in her place. So the demons grab him and they take him, and then she gives him the eye of death. I can only imagine the death stare of a woman that has been through hell, literally the underworld and back, and then coming back to see that her husband, whom she likely loved, was not even concerned with her being gone. He could care less that she was not there. And then she speaks the word of death and the cry of guilt. And the Gala began beating him and cutting him with axes. And even though he tries to escape him, the tale ultimately ends with Dumazid residing in the underworld for 6 months out of the year, and his sister takes his place for the other 6 months. So you have this. So when I heard that part of the story, I'm thinking, what animals in the animal kingdom, I guess not animals, but insects in the animal kingdom consume their husbands like after they procreate? The first one that popped into my head was the praying mantis. And so it's not necessarily like a seductive thing. It's the females will decapitate the males during or after mating, which the male's body continues to copulate during due to reflexive nerve action. So when they're reproducing, she'll decapitate the female praying mantis will decapitate the male and eat his body. I don't know if he's eating, but it's just that's part of that. The black widow spider also, she will kill and eat the mate after that. Hi Shannon, how you fixed your name? But he'll possibly get killed and eaten after reproduction. And, the name Black Widow is that way for a reason. Some cases, males may offer themselves up voluntarily to be eaten after that. So it's this death of devotion and transformation through intimacy. Some other animal or some other creatures that do it are redback spiders. The most dramatic widow sister, the male actually somersaults into the female's fangs during sex and increases his chance. This increases the chance his sperm fertilizes her eggs before he dies. So this is like a complete sacrifice. This is not what Dumazid did at all. Orb weaving spiders, they will engage, multiple species of them will engage in sexual cannibalism. And scorpions are another one. And then there's some flies, beetles, and amphibians that also do this. So, as I'm thinking about this pretty crazy story of, the whole story in general is pretty wild. And so I'm just thinking like there's this masculine piece of you still need to be mourning. So I'm looking at this from a masculine, feminine, energetic state and not necessarily males and females state. But let's look at the significance. So in this is a Babylonian myth. The most prominent female deity is Ishtar and or Inanna. So both of those names are kind of used interchangeably. And it ranges a few concepts from love to war and fertility and healing. So this in this mythology, Inanna is known as the Queen of Heaven, and she's considered a patron of Uruk, where most of her temple, her important temple, was built. So her descent into the underworld has been interpreted in many ways. Popular contemporary interpretations have frequently used a feminist lens, which I don't necessarily agree with. I mean, you can use that, but this is not necessarily female empowerment. This is feminine energy clearing emotional stuff. Like, that is what the feminine energy does. She is kind of this chaotic being that can go into the chaos and meet it out and then come back to present. But she does need that masculine energy. The feminine energy needs the masculine energy as the anchor to come back to. And that's kind of the way that I see it. And if you guys disagree, please comment so in the comments and we can definitely discuss that. So, in a feminist lens, the interpretations are read as empowering for women, particularly Inanna's willful decision to descend into the underworld, knowing that she might not be able to return. So there's a little bit of bravery and courageousness that comes in. Hashboy says, I agree. Yeah, it's, we need to be aware and name these energies. So she knows that she's going to go into the underworld, and she knows that the rule is if you go, you might not be able to return. So in this way, she becomes the archetype of feminine transformation and experience. It's not necessarily female transformation and experience, it's feminine transformation and experience. And men, as well as women, anybody has these energies within themselves to manipulate within themselves and control within themselves and do this really intense work, which is go into your own personal underworld. Look at what's there. You may die for 3 days, 3 nights. I mean, this is an archetype for a reason. When I read the 3 days, 3 nights, the other thing that I thought about is, so in my Native American heritage, there is a ritual. It's performed differently now, but back in the day, what would happen is they would actually get, so the warriors of the tribe would actually get punctured in the ribs. A rope would be put through it, and they would be hung for 3 days, 3 nights in the middle of July or whatever whenever the beginning of their year was. And they would be hung there for 3 days, 3 nights in that ceremony. Hi, Margie May. Good to see you. Oh, Rihanna. Good to see you. So you have this really interesting 3 days, 3 nights. It's obviously a biblical thing. Jesus was on the cross for 3 days. So you have this really, this 3 days of darkness. And there is obviously a lot of significance in that. But you kind of see it in all of these cultural spaces where that is commonly a number. And to have it be with death is also an interesting parallel here across cultures. So the text hints at, but doesn't specifically state a reason or purpose for her descent. So a feminist interpretation may be it's a personal journey she knows she must endure in order to acquire further strength and wisdom, which I would agree. If we're looking at going into the underworld as this metaphoric analogy, and I bring this up because, like I said at the beginning, I am doing a lot of intergenerational trauma healing in my own family, but then it's also for the collective. And, there's big, deep parts of that. There's a lot. There's a lot of trauma that I have to overcome and endure. And, I'm willingly doing the work. So I willingly have to go into these underworlds and look at things from not a poor me lens. It's an act of bravery to be doing this work. And it's not easy. It's taxing on the body. It I can feel it weaken me sometimes, and I can feel the pull of death just like surrounding me. And it's not the easiest thing to even consider that, this is the way that it is, but it really is the only way to clear that DNA trauma from my family and from my own personal self, and then share that transformation with everybody else. So, this is really deep, intrinsic, and valuable work. And it's not necessarily for the weak hearted. Like, there is a certain strength that you have to have. But then the opposite of that is you also need to have this softness when you come out of it. And I know that she was like, "Oh my gosh, my husband wasn't lamenting me," but it's not necessarily that when I'm not like being as crazy as that. But she had to choose somebody, and he didn't mourn her, so it was him. So the some of the thoughts could be this is a testament of further strength and wisdom. It could also be the ability to be a little bit softer. And Enlil and Nana's disapproval of her descent supports the idea that and implies that they considered desire for this knowledge hubristic. So, a couple of the gods, the moon god and the god of air, are both like, do you really need that knowledge? Do you really need to go into the underworld and know what it's like to go through that? So that's kind of up in the air. We could talk about. And then some have read that the removal of her expensive clothes and jewelry at the gates is Inanna stripping away the symbols of who she is and or who she was. So she's becoming something more. And if you really look at like her being the called the Queen of Heaven, if you're if you're looking at like there's heavenly information and there's this like depth of information if you're going into the underworld, if you're going to be gaining all of that, like that's a holistic knowledge, and maybe it might help you to become a little bit more present and more well-rounded. So now you have the wisdom of heaven and then the knowledge of the underworld. Okay. And then when she returns, we'll talk about her choosing her husband. This is just the significance that ebsco.com said. It's the only one that I could find like the full story of it. So when she does return, she chooses her husband because he possesses the same feminine strength and wisdom she has. And so maybe she sees that. The annual death and rebirth of Dumazid, so he's going down there for 6 months and then coming back up and then cycling that with his sister, has been seen as a representation of growth and harvest cycle of crops. Along the same lines, Inanna's descendants can return as can be read as a metaphor for the revival of life in spring, and later Babylonian versions, Ishtar, which descends into the underworld to retrieve Tammuz, or Dumazid, who has already died and thereby initiates this annual cycle. So there's a little bit of seasonal significance in there as well. And then let's see, is there any other things I really want to chat about? We kind of talked about that story. Yeah, I think we chatted enough about it. Okay. So, I was talking about this because my uncle is actually in ICU, and I had a little bit of a death over the weekend, internal death. Oh, thank you. It's my mermaid eyeshadow. I can hear the emotion in your voice. You're a warrior. Big hugs. Yeah, it's definitely like I said. I've had a crazy weekend. There was definitely a little bit of ego death that happened, and I wanted to bring that forward because it was something that was pretty interesting. Because one, like I've been working, and I think it's so important that we all work on how to maintain our nervous systems and the exhaustion, the stress of trying to care for somebody else that's unable to care for themselves, that's in critical condition. It really just kind of brings forward these feelings of helplessness, the closeness of death in that as well. And one of my things is like I could feel my nervous system be off, and so it's just a blessing to be able to feel like how shot my nervous system was, and it brought me back to, hey, you can descend and think about this. And I'm very close to my uncle, and it started making me think about my mom, and then mourning the losses of the people that I've lost in my family, which has been a pretty large amount. And so it's bringing up all these feelings of loss. And one of the stories that was happening in my head is everyone that I love and am close to dies. And it was, obviously it's a story, and maybe there's some partial truth to it, but I had to reframe that. So, in this work, when those kind of stories come up, it's huge. That's a huge rejection or a huge abandonment wound that could sit in your system and you may not even know it. And so to reframe that from, this is a huge, significant loss, this is a story that I'm holding on to reframe it in that it's not really a loss as much as it is, there's different ways to look at that story. So the first thing I noticed, being anchored in my body, having my inner king be my return to, like, I do a lot of this work internally. So having my inner king be my return, my anchor that will take me out of those feelings. The tears we cry when mourning literally have different chemicals in them because we are releasing sorrow. Yes, yes, it does. Like it is. It's and it's this really huge wave of relief as well. So, I was saying I was holding on to this story, and it was really affecting me. And I knew intellectually that it's not necessarily that story that's going to carry on, but I could just feel that story sitting in my nervous system. So when you're being present with yourself and you're looking at the fear of loss, the fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, the scarcity feelings that you have, really think about how that's sitting in your nervous system because your body is remembering that. And if you're repeating that story, it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome it if that is what you're becoming. So when you say I fear abandonment, I fear rejection, I fear loss, I fear death. When you're saying that, your body is remembering that. It's basically like putting little labels on you saying like fear is what defines me. So when we're looking at these, as we're descending and we're like stripping away and we're feeling really vulnerable, which is necessary in order to understand, how we're moving through life. It's a necessity. We have to really look at, okay, is this how I want to define me? By a fear of, let's just use a fear of loss. Is that how I want to define me, or do I want to rewrite that story? So these fears, I kind of call them ghost stories, and they sit in your nervous system, and they really are ghost stories. So a fear of loss could be, maybe you had a grandparent that you absolutely love and then they died. And then you never really were able, because you're so young, to transmute that story or like reconnect with, I didn't really lose my grandparent. They left. It wasn't anything that I did. It was just they left. They died. They had, whatever the terminal situation was. And it's it's a way that trauma can be sitting in our nervous system. So it's a ghost story of like, I fear loss because I lost somebody that I love dearly. And I think like on a personal level, I can say that that likely happened in my life because I was very close with my grandmother, and she died of, her and my mother both died of brain tumors. And so that story is probably sitting in my nervous system somewhere from like my little 6-year-old self, not knowing how to work through the trauma of death. And so but it is a ghost story. And then subsequently after that, if you're continuing to experience loss, that ghost story like kind of like gets more and more embedded into your nervous system and into your DNA. And then it just kind of loops itself. So we want to remove these ghost stories from our definition of who we are and how we think of ourselves. These stories, like the story of me saying everyone I love dies, it's not the truth. That's not a truth. It can be, it can't seem like a truth, but it's not the truth. It's just the trauma of all of the other loss speaking. It's like you can hear the ghost stories going, ooh, and you hear it, and it gets louder and louder, and the more that you kind of embed that into your nervous system. So this is a story of grief pretending it's prophecy. It's not true. It's not true, but it's it still is like a little bit of grief, but it's kind of like trying to say, oh yeah, now I'm a prophecy. Now I'm truth. And it's not. So love does not bring death. Love is what stays. So you've got to know that if you're experiencing these feelings of fear, abandonment, loss, grief, any of these like really, I don't want to call it deadly, but just these labels around death, that we want to rewrite it. It's not bringing death. It's what stays. So when you have that story, and your story could be different. It may not. I'm just using my story as an example because it's so fresh and clear in my system right now. That story of everyone I love dies. We have to kind of step back from that and say, what about this story is trying to protect me right now? Is it trying to protect me from abandonment? Is it trying to protect me from being left alone or loneliness? Is it trying to protect me from feeling powerless? And powerless is such a huge fear that I think a lot of us have in our systems, and we don't even realize it. But yeah, we need to look at why that story is sitting there and figure out, what is it truly protecting me from. My story is very similar to yours. Listening to you helps. So thank you. You're welcome. Yes. This is why I do these. And it's also a way for me to kind of cathartically get the stories out as well. Okay? And I know that I'm not unique in my experiences, that these are experiences, like I said, for the collective. It's not just for my family and my whatever. It's for everybody to clean up and reframe. So there's nothing wrong about being afraid in a moment. And so there's nothing wrong with feeling a fear. In fact, if you do feel a fear, feel it and try to get some information out of it. So, when Inanna is going into the underworld, she's experiencing all of this loss. Obviously, there were beautiful treasures that made her powerful, but she's experiencing the loss the deeper and deeper and deeper she gets until she enters that throne room. And she's entering it naked, which is a very vulnerable position to be in. And then she has all of this guilt and shame cast on her, which is another reason why it's so, like, you can fear being shamed, you can fear being vulnerable, you can fear being powerless, and that's got to feel that way if you've been stripped of everything you are and then being left to the mercy of shame and guilt and trying to work through that. So we're in this vulnerable position, but when you're in that vulnerable position, that's when you could start to really see clearly of, oh, I see why I feel shame about this. I can see why I feel guilt about that. And, I'm going to be super honest and vulnerable with you guys. I was feeling that in that moment. I was like, man, I feel so powerless and so alone in this moment. And the people that, like, having that story, everyone I love dies, is a serious, it's a seriously impactful feeling, where then it's like, I'm going to protect the people that I love by pushing them further away from me because I don't want them to die. I don't want them to be associated with me because they're going to die. That's a pretty heavy that's a pretty heavy, like, way of getting from everyone I love dies to, like, then start pushing, like, thinking about how am I going to push these people away. And I was mentally going through the agony of this, of how am I going to distance myself from these people that I'm getting close to. And that in itself is a serious measure. So when you're there, you're exhausted, and I was feeling so exhausted, and the exhaustion was just, because that exhaustion, just like every time I always start crying when I'm exhausted, so I know I'm exhausted, and I know I can name that feeling. Name that feeling, exhaustion. And exhaustion every single time. Physical exhaustion will make me cry every single time, which is why I think working, like, manual labor is so helpful for some people to really connect with themselves, because in that labor, in that pushing yourself, or even exercising, in that pushing yourself, it kind of brings you closer to your emotions because you feel a little more vulnerable in those situations. So if you're not getting up and moving around and having a hard time connecting with yourself, chances are you might not want to get off the couch, because you know that if you go and walk the mile around your neighborhood, might start bringing up feelings. You're going to be left with your own, mental whatever. You're not going to be able to distract yourself like you would be able to from sitting on a couch. So, part of me realized, like, I don't want to have this, I don't want to hold this belief. And this is an intergenerational trauma belief because of the way my family was raised, because of the things that they carried. And it's not that they carried the wickedness. They had gotten rid of the wickedness, and so I'm really grateful in that. But then they still carried this codependency and the, how do I want to say this? Instead of emotionally regulating by doing the work that I'm doing, They emotionally regulated by managing it through codependent mechanisms. Codependency is still this like band-aid buffer to get you through a traumatic experience, but it doesn't clear the trauma. So that's why I say that the generational trauma still sits in my nervous system, in my DNA, and this is true for everybody. So I'm just using myself as an example. It still sits in there, but in order to clear it, I have to go into the underworld and deal with the story of everyone I love dies, because it's holding all of these other codes that I need to clear. I hope that lands. That's a pretty big truth drop there. So when you're ready to descend into the underworld, you're ready to say, I don't want to carry this belief around anymore. And I'm using my everyone I love dies story as an example, but you know what your story is if you start to really sit and think about what is the story and why am I believing it's true? Why am I believing in it? So you don't have to carry this belief around. So when we look at how to reframe, which is important, we're rewriting the story, and we can do that now. And if we do it now, it impacts our ancestors and their carrying of that story, and it actually cleans out the DNA. So we're clearing out that story, and the generations ahead of us will have a clean, clearer DNA, even if they're still living or if they haven't even been born yet. Your clearing is going to help them. It just kind of webs out in both directions, and which is why 7 generations is like very helpful to think about. So instead of saying everyone I love dies, let's try and reframe the story by saying every everyone I love leaves their mark on me. Okay? Love doesn't promise forever. It promises presence. I am still here, which means love still lives. So I'm still here, I'm still loving, even despite what transactional things have happened around me. Love and loss coexist, but one doesn't erase the other. Okay, so there's still going to be loss, still going to experience loss. And, as I get older, maybe it's going to happen even more frequently. And I remember my grandpa telling me, it was really hard for him because he was in his older age and he was seeing all these younger generations passing away, and it was really tough for him. All right. So this doesn't have to be your generational curse to hold. In fact, it actually, once you start clearing out this emotional intergenerational trauma, it's actually like it gets a little easier and easier. And then you get a little bit more and more strong, more regulated in how you approach these things. So, a few weeks ago, I had a visit from my own inner king. I had a vision of him, and I was like, okay, here he is. And here I am crying, like, oh my gosh, going through like really extreme fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of loss, which has kind of been my main thing that I'm clearing out. And I'm going to tell you that I'm going through these initiations right now because something big is on the other end. I've been asking for really big things to happen. I've been asking for really big things that require tons of this regulation to be able to hold it. And in order to hold it, I have to get strong with my inner king. That inner king has to be my container to hold the things that are coming in so that my feminine nature can, just do her little whatever she does. So the big emotional intelligence lesson here is I am living and I want to continue to be living. And I'm a living woman and an embodiment of my own masculine and feminine energy. And I'm working on clearing and cleaning that up, not just for myself, but for my family and for the collective here. So, one of the ways that I want to kind of bring this story back to emotional intelligence and why, because grief is going to happen, loss is going to happen, these things are going to happen. And we can say that this is how do we carry ourselves through love? How do we carry love through loss and still keep ourselves, like not lose ourselves in this? So this is where emotional intelligence will becomes spiritual intelligence. And I named my business, I named this podcast Soulestic Intelligence because we're looking at the full body intelligence mechanism and how to really harmoniously like put these together. So this is a lesson about differentiation. We're rewriting that. We're pulling those labels off. We're stripping ourselves of these labels that may have felt like they brought us power. Like I said, when we believe that, I have a fear of loss, that fear of loss is like holding us together to a certain extent. Now, do we want to remain there? Not necessarily, but that fear, that emotional fear of loss, abandonment, rejection, whatever it is, that fear is holding us together somehow. It's binding us together, and we can still hold that for many, many years, and it still will like help keep us bound together, right? So, the journey into that fear and really feeling into it and feeling into whatever it is, like the loss, the guilt, the shame, what we need to do is differentiate. So we need to really redefine and say, I am not my grief. My grief doesn't define me. My grief is there to help clear the loss. I am not this story. That story is there to hold us together to a certain extent and protect us. Like I said, as I'm sitting there and I'm like, everyone I love dies, like literally I'm thinking, how do I protect this person by like distancing myself from them? How do I protect this person by distancing myself from them? Do I just say like I'm going to give up on all my relationships because I don't want you guys to die? That like thought that I can control their destinies and their lives by distancing myself from them that's a lie. Like what's going to happen to them is going to happen to them regardless of the proximity they are to me. I'm not I'm not the what is he called? I'm not the Grim Reaper. I'm not the Grim Reaper. I don't know if there's any other like archetypes. I can't think of any right now, but like I'm not the Grim Reaper. Your proximity to me is not like this key trigger or trap or whatever of you losing your life. Okay? So I am not this story. I am not the story of everyone I love dies. I am not what happened to them. So, my mom came down with cancer. I am not what happened to her. I'm just in proximity of that. That's just a truth in my life that, you know, it happened. And, maybe it happened for a reason and it's going to take me a year or so or however long it's going to take me to realize, oh, you know, her passing away was a way for me to deepen into myself and relieve myself of any codependency and really see any of the generational markings that were left from that. And now it's my turn to do whatever I can to help my future generations. How can I help to help them get through their generations? So I'm not what happened to them. I'm not what happened to my uncle. He got into a severe accident and is in ICU. I am not what happened to him. That was his choices. You know, it hurts to see him in his condition, but the reason that he got there, it's not for me. I'm not that what happened to him. And then I'm the one who feels it, and I don't have to like it. I feel it. I feel it deeply. You know, with my uncle, I can say that intellectually, I know that his choices are his own. Intellectually, I know that, you know, there's certain things that brought him to that level. However, they're not, I don't own those things, and nor should I'm a deep empath. Like I can I can really take on a lot of energy. I'm just like built that way. But I also have to learn how to release some of these things too. And this is where energetic boundaries come in. Okay, I can see that this happened. Now I know that these things need to happen. And how am I going to re- relegate myself? I need to have my own regulation of how do I parse this out? Am I going to be the one that's just like completely sacrificing myself to this, or am I going to really look at what boundaries do I have? How much of myself am I willing to sacrifice? Because it's not just me I sacrifice. It's my family, my sons, you know, everybody in my life gets affected by my sacrifice. So I need to look at what is my sacrifice going to be, and am I willing to do that? Am I willing to, how much am I willing to sacrifice? So I can be one who feels these things, but I'm not the one who is it. And the last thing that I want to say is, you know, as I'm looking at it, I can see the full story of, you know, his life, his early life, and then his lifestyle as he like went through his adulthood that ended up in this situation. And for me, I can say, okay, I can see this pretty clearly now. And I know that there are these pieces that are kind of connecting into him that are generational. And those things are things I can control and do something about. How am I going to clear the trauma? So this is a moment where if you are hold a lot of empathy and are open, especially if you're a mother, that can really open you with, especially if you have small children now, you might feel even more vulnerable because, you know, you're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting your offspring. So you just have this even bigger space to hold for those that are vulnerable. But we need to use this moment to learn how to hold that grief and still have boundaries, still be able to say no, you know. So a big part of me just like, I just cried because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave, but I know I have to because I have, you know, these things to take care of, which is, you know, my son, and my household also needs to be taken care of, and I can't just live at a hospital even if I like want to. So it's really learning how to establish these really healthy boundaries energetically and physically around that system. We're differentiating ourselves. We're becoming spiritual resilience in this way. All right. I have about 15 more minutes, and so I'm going to go through some core emotional intelligence themes that in this story, and then I might do a part two. We'll see. We'll see what comes in. I think I had another topic that I wanted to talk, and I might do a part two this week, or just like a bonus episode. But so we're looking at emotional containment versus emotional flooding. What does that mean? So when I am holding this story, looking at it, reframing it, and changing it, what I'm really doing is I'm learning how to contain it instead of just like letting the floodgates open. So if you think about letting the floodgates open, what happens? Let's think about if a dam was to break in an area. There's likely homes and a life down below that would just be flooded. So think about that as your emotions. If you're trying to like, you can either contain it, or if the floodgates open, then all of a sudden everything is drowning, and you will be drowning in it if you're living below that dam. So this means making space for that grief without letting it dictate your reality. If you say this instead, I feel like everyone I love dies, but I also know this trauma echo is not, it's a trauma echo. It's not a prophecy. This is not something that's truly going to happen. It's just this trauma that's echoing, and it's telling me the story that I really need to kind of just clean up out of my system. And thank God for that. I thank God that He shows me, these revelations in my life of, this is where you can clean up. Here's your trauma echo. Your grandmother died when she was 6, and you were helpless against that, and you loved her very much, and she loved you. And then all of a sudden she was gone. The same thing. My dad was there, and then at age 3, like, he's out of the picture. You don't see him again anymore. And then even still with like my grandpa, it's not that he died. They just like left my life. And so there's just all this loss that became this trauma echo. But it's just that. It's a trauma echo, and it's not real. It's not a prophecy. It's not, it doesn't have to be true. In fact, if I hold it to be true, it's more likely to happen. But I'm going to let that go. And you know what? Great things could happen from that. These emotional floodings can make you feel chaotic. And like I said, you might be able to hold yourself in there, but really becoming regulated is the key piece here. The second thing that I am going to definitely like bold print this is self-compassion is part of self-regulation. In releasing the story, it's giving myself so much grace, because that story was holding me through the darkest nights of my life. And now I'm choosing to have compassion for myself by releasing the story. And so having that grace for myself is really resting. It's putting yourself into that parasympathetic state of rest, digest, repair. And this means your brain is saying, you should be stronger. You should hold on to this story. You should be stronger. And like not listening to your brain and say, nope, I'm going to rest. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to take a cold shower, maybe go cold plunge. I'm going to reset myself. And I'm going to say, I'm human. I'm loving. I'm soft. And that in itself is sacred. I forgive myself for needing rest while carrying so much. If you've ever been somebody like me that has been like, there's all these things going on and you have so much anxiety, and then you go to sit down because you need to rest, but then you immediately get back up because you're like, all you can see is the laundry list of things that need to be done. And you're like, I can't even sit. Nope. Don't apologize for resting yourself. You just go on and do it. And then finally, to kind of wrap this story up, and like I said, I might do a bonus stream. Just with everything, it's kind of crazy, but we get to choose our narratives. So emotionally intelligent people choose their narratives. They learn to author their own story. And I say, if you think about authority, the first part of that is author. So if you have personal authority, that means you're personally authoring your life. Despite what chaotically is going around you, you're choosing You're the main character of your life, and you're choosing your own adventure, and you're writing it the way that you want it to be written. Nobody else is living your life. You are the only one that's living your life. So your story could be, and you might subconsciously be doing it, as you're writing all this grief into your life. You're writing all of the things that are happening in your life. Like your energy is calling it in. Subconsciously, you don't even know that, oh, these things are happening because my energy is bringing it in. And that's not to like place blame or anything like that, but that is that you can pick up your own metaphorical pen and paper right now and write different endings to your chapters. So when I'm looking at rewriting my Everyone I Love Dies, I'm looking at rewriting that. Like the things that happen around me, I have very little control over much of that. But I do have control over how I react to that and how I regulate myself in it. And what boundaries I put on. Okay, I see that this terrible thing happened. However, this is much energy. This is as much energy that I'm willing to give. This is as much energy that I'm willing to put into it. This pain is not a chapter. It's not. It's just a chapter. It's not the ending. This is not the ending. So when you are becoming a master of your own emotional resilience, you will learn to respond to these stories with lots of self-awareness, lots of awareness of the whole situation, a lot of awareness of all the possibilities it takes to get into that space. Even when life literally shatters in front of you. You look at it, you might feel some of the feelings in it, but you're also so aware of the feelings that you can feel into it. I just need to get, this, I just need to get this cry out. This feeling is popping up. I just need to get this cry out. And that cry could be very healing for you. It's literally like these little emotional pieces that are just like jetting out of your eyeballs because it needs to. It's the little salt stories, the little saltwater stories that you're just releasing. And that's fine. And feel it. Feel into it. Give it its space. You don't want to hold it back. You don't want to dam it up and then have to be sitting on these stories that you don't want in your system for long periods of time. So just let it out. Feel it. Think about that feeling and then really truly go back and say, that story was very prominent in this. For me, my story was Everyone I Love Dies. Sitting, and nobody died over the weekend, by the way. But I just was having these feelings come up because of past trauma, past loss. So when we're looking at mastering ourselves in and regulating ourselves and really holding this beautiful resilience, we do it with self-awareness. We do it with self-compassion, self-respect, very nice boundaries. Having boundaries and saying no to things does not make you an evil person. It doesn't make you a horrible person. It's showing you that you respect yourself enough to hold those boundaries. So in this whole thing, as I'm learning about myself, as I'm learning to really clear up this huge storyline that I've been holding on to, I have to remember that I'm not breaking. I am not shattering. In fact, the beautiful part of it is I'm transforming through this. I'm actually gaining insight and wisdom and knowledge to bring to my the people that watch my podcast or to hear any stories or anybody I interact with. It like makes me even more sharp and able to pinpoint the pieces that are happening in our lives by me going through that. It's a transformation and it's not bypassing. and it's not pretending. This is real life for me. And it's a real way of learning how to relieve myself from these pains. Because, like I said, I'm probably the most sensitive person I know. Like, I'm the most sensitive person I know. But I also, like, have this really, really strong character, too. And it really helped me to realize some of the emotional generational inheritance that I got and to, like, clear that out, too. So, I'm going to leave you guys with this. I have to go get my son, but I'm going to leave you guys with this. Emotional management, not regulation, management, meaning that if you are coming to the aid of somebody who is capable of doing their own aid. So let's say you have an adult child and you're completely enabling them and you're like, I wish that they would change, but like you still, you know, pay their bills and you're giving them a room and you're just kind of like codependently taking care of them because you don't want to see them struggle or do whatever. That's you're emotionally managing them. Okay, and that is a survival mechanism that you need to look at yourself. It's not healing. It's not it's not helping them because they're more than capable if they're an adult of doing that themselves. They just have to be pushed in their own way. But emotional management is that. It's like codependent, taking care of other people because if they suffer, then you suffer. If they're doing poorly, then you're doing poorly, and it like reflects on you. And so it's like this older sibling taking care of the younger siblings kind of feeling. When you're all siblings, you're all kids, right? But that older sibling has to kind of like grow up a little bit more and then like take care of people. And it could be from trauma. Like like I said, emotional management isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but it is a band-aid. It is a way to kind of hold things together for a little bit of time. It's like one of those ace bandages. It's like holding the arm stiff when you don't want to like move it around. But at some point you got to take it off and let the body fully heal and then fully become its arm if your arm is wrapped. So we're not when we're using emotional management as a survival mechanism, meaning like your parents may have taught you emotional management, we're wanting to like give that up. We're gonna like let that go. It served its purpose, and now we're going to be strong by developing our own emotional regulation, meaning emotional resilience, being able to see the picture for what it is, being able to be really loving and compassionate to yourself, having really strong boundaries. I think last week, it was on personal power of what is personal power, how does that look, and how do I achieve that? So really gaining in that competency of personal power and then growing in these other beautiful directions of how am I going to get from emotional management, which thank you emotional management for getting me through like so many years of my life, to okay, now I feel emotionally resilient. Nobody is going to shake me in my core because I know who I am. I am my own living being and I can feel myself living now. I'm not living in survival mechanism. I'm living as myself, as a divine being here, authoring my life and being a shining example to others when they need it. Whew. That's a lot. Okay. I got a boogie. I got to get my boy. I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. You can, if you are new here, please like, subscribe, comment. I love the discussions back and forth. Like I said, I might do a bonus stream this week. Just give me a little bit of time to kind of process a little bit more through it, and I will I will definitely, if you have any feedback, I'll address it in my next stream. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope this was really helpful for you and really activating for you. Just as like my main purpose is to help activate you. And yes, Jerusha, thank you so much for joining. Rihanna, good to see you. Love you guys. Have a good one and take care of yourselves. Love you. Yeah.